Hello there, and welcome to my guide on how to complete the Night at the Theater quest at a low level, using pretty much just ranged. As you can see here, I'm 89 combat. I actually completed the theater at 87 as well, and here are my stats. I didn't even have base 70 melees, I was just under at the time. I did have the 80 ranged, however. The ranged is the most important for this specific strategy, and I would suggest that you have at least 70. Ideally, you have more like 75 to 80 though, like I have here. As for prayer, anything over 43 is sufficient. I didn't feel like I was running out of prayer at any point, and by no means is rigor necessary. Just regular eagle eye was fine. For my equipment, you can see what I have here. It's basically just void ranged, using a black dragonhide shield and god dragonhide boots. I also think bringing a ranging book or an unholy book would work just fine. I brought a fury. If you can afford an anguish, obviously it would be a lot better, but the fury was also just fine. I also only have an explorer's ring for a small prayer bonus. If you have an archer's ring, of course that would be better, but again, this is a pretty budget setup that I've got going on here. And finally, I definitely recommend bringing dragon bolts. I didn't have any on me anymore, so I'm just using the diamond bolts E. I bet you'd be able to make it work with these, but the dragon bolts would obviously make sure that you make it. They are quite expensive, but you don't need very many to make a run work. In the inventory, as you can see, we're mostly focused on healing. I've got exactly 12 brews and a couple of food. Now, the reason I've split it up this way is you get bandages in the theater, and the food is primarily there to help account for early mistakes until you get your first set of bandages after bloat. In addition to that, I just have a raging potion, a super combat potion for bloat, and a prayer potion just to help ease the prayer loss in the early parts of the theater. For supplementary gear, as you can see, I basically just have a melee weapon with a defender, a spec weapon for bloat, which is dragon dagger, and the trident of the seas. The only time you really need to use anything other than your range setup is bloat and Nilos. And you might be thinking, that's kind of silly. Sodag and Verzik are both melee bosses as well. But you'd be surprised. In the theater, their combat stats are reduced enough that ranged actually does really well and makes the mechanics a lot simpler. And then the trident is actually only used for Nilos. That's the only time we mage at all. Definitely the key strategy here is to keep costs low and to keep complexity down. I could bring more switches like additional helmets for my void, but really it's not necessary. I had no problems just cheesing it through with this setup, and as you can see, it's not very expensive. So upon entering the theater, you're going to be going through a series of bosses, and they kind of get harder the further you get along. The first boss, Maiden, is actually incredibly easy and mostly intended to be ranged anyway, so basically all you're going to do is stand back a little bit ways, pray mage, and range her down. At 75%, 50%, and 25% HP, she will spawn a little spider minion that goes to heal her. All you have to do is just try to DPS this down before it gets to her. Freezes aren't necessary in story mode at all, because they only have 16 HP, so you should have no problem one-hitting them or maybe two-hitting them if necessary. The only other thing that you need to look out for this boss is that she fires blood at you every once in a while. Just make sure you don't stand on the blood and you'll be fine. It does a lot of damage and heals her. In order to make it a little simpler, you can always walk between each fire of your crossbow, just to make sure that you don't accidentally get caught off guard. Overall, there's no reason that Maiden should take you any supplies other than maybe a dose of prayer potion, and make sure you try to conserve it as much as possible, as you will get a full heal and restore after she dies. Now next is Bloat, and Bloat is actually a little punishing if you don't know what to do. So the whole goal is to stay out of his line of sight by standing on the other side of the pillar that he'll walk around inside the room. You need to keep an eye out because he will occasionally turn around randomly, and also when he gets lower health, he'll start running. So the main problem here is going to be conserving your run energy. Now, I didn't think it was a problem, so I didn't bring any stamina potion, but you could bring a stamina potion here in order to conserve some energy. But in my opinion, all you really need to do is just walk while he walks and then run while he runs, and you shouldn't run out of energy. After a few seconds of walking around the pillar, he will eventually go into this kind of disabled state where you can get off a few hits on him. Now, if you get there in a reasonable amount of time, you should be able to hit him 5 times before you need to get away. If you don't get away fast enough, he will hit you for a large amount of damage as he wakes up. So basically all you need to do is just count those 5 attacks and then run away to the other side of the pillar. The only other thing is to keep an eye out for the falling body parts around the room. But honestly, they are so uncommon that unless you're really unlucky, you won't get hit more than a couple times. And getting hit here a few times is totally fine because we're going to get bandages after this room, so the food is going to be dropped anyway if you don't use it. So basically just run around the column until he gets disabled, hit him 5 times, and then he dies and you get to move on. And again, after he dies, you'll be able to get these 10 bandages. Take as many of them as you can fit without sacrificing any of your actual brews or restores. At this point, I recommend dropping the super combat and the ranging potions in exchange for bandages, as the bandages are basically a super combat, a ranging potion, a shark, and a stamina dose all rolled into one. So they're really powerful and way more important than these potions. I didn't actually do this here, and that was a big mistake. The only thing better than them is the brews and restores, because we'll need a lot of healing for later on. So the third room is Nilo, and this is one place where I think a blowpipe would actually be really nice, because these guys only have 2 HP, and you need to kill them as fast as possible. My whole strategy here was just to focus on one color until most of them were dead, and then swap to another color. I basically always deprioritize the melee minions as much as possible, because when these guys time out, they explode and deal a good amount of damage, and I didn't want to be near them at all, so I stayed away from the columns as much as possible. In order to know what style to attack them with, it's really simple. The green ones need ranged, the blue ones need magic, and the white ones need melee. One thing you need to be absolutely sure of is that you're prioritizing the ones that are damaging you first, because they actually do a lot of damage. If you can afford a Ring of Suffering with recoil charges, that's probably really nice to bring here. Otherwise, I don't think recoils are worth it, because you're just going to burn through them so quickly anyway, and the inventory space is much more needed for other things. Overall, it'll seem really scary during the Nilo waves, but I don't think it's too bad. If you let a column or two fall, it shouldn't be too bad. I don't think you really need to prioritize the low health column or anything. Just keep killing as many as possible and focusing on the ones that are actually damaging you first. Oh, and if you don't have 75 magic for a trident, something like Ivan's Blast is perfectly fine here. It does suck that it's a tick slower though, so if you can use a trident, definitely use it. After you survive the waves, Nilo itself will spawn, and this is actually a walk in the park compared to the waves itself. Basically, Nilo will change color respecting each of the 3 colors that you've seen during the waves, attacking with the same style as its color, and its weakness is also the same style as its color, so it makes it really easy. Basically, all you want to do here is be ready to change your prayer when it changes color, as you'll want to avoid damage as much as possible. After you change prayer, swap to the correct attack style and give it an attack. If you do this reasonably fast enough, you should be able to get 3 attacks in with the scimitar or the trident, or 2 attacks with the crossbow before it changes again. Overall, you should really use no supplies on the Nilo fight itself. The waves will probably take some of your bandages. For me, it did take all of the ones that I managed to bring from Bloat, which was unfortunate, but overall the room shouldn't cost too many supplies. Once you've just damaged down Nilo, you're able to move on to the next room. So this is where things start to get a little weird. Sodag, as you may know, is a melee boss. You're supposed to melee it down as its melee defenses are the lowest. But because we're in story mode, its stats are reduced so much that you can actually damage it pretty consistently with ranged. That said, it's still going to be a really long fight, so that's pretty unfortunate. And if you can melee it, it's probably better to melee it anyway. But because of how the mechanics get a lot easier when you're standing a distance away from it, I think it's worthwhile to actually just cheese it with ranged. So Sodag is really simple. If he fires a red ball at you, pray mage, and if he fires a black ball at you, pray range. That's simple. Unlike most NPCs in the game, the prayer check doesn't actually happen until the ball reaches you versus when the ball emits from the boss. So it's something to keep in mind. You want to keep your prey on until the ball has actually hit you. He'll also occasionally fire off a giant slow moving ball that in the actual theater is an insta-kill mechanic, but here it just does 15 damage. There's nothing you can do to reduce the damage or stop it, so you just kind of have to take it head on. Just make sure you keep your health high enough and you'll be fine. The only other thing about Sodag is, of course, the maze that he traps you in when he hits 66 and 33% health. Now, definitely don't panic with the maze. You're not guiding anyone else through, so you don't need to go fast. You will take a small amount of damage over time, but the little tornado that forces you down the path won't actually spawn until you're on it. So make sure you line yourself up and get yourself ready to click through the maze as fast as you can. But overall, don't panic. You have more time than it seems to get through this maze, and the damage over time is really low. All that said, this should be pretty straightforward. It is going to take quite a while, but it shouldn't take too much damage over the entire fight. The unfortunate part is the giant red balls will be a little drain on your supplies. I used about 2.5 brews here, as well as a few doses of restore, which was pretty unfortunate, but wound up still being enough to get me through the rest of the theater, so not too bad. Oh, and don't forget to grab your bandages after Sodag. There's another 10 of them, so fill up your inventory with them for sure. So after Sodag is Zarpus, and Zarpus has 3 phases. The first phase just has you running around the room standing on these little spots where balls kind of spawn and charge up Zarpus to be a little stronger. Try to stand on them as much as possible just to block a little bit of health. It'll make the fight a little bit easier for you. It's really simple and straightforward though. After this continues for a little while, Zarpus will stand up and you'll have a chance to get off a couple free hits before he starts attacking you. And the whole strategy around Zarpus is you want to avoid these little green projectiles as much as possible. And how we're going to do that is we're basically going to stand on one tile until he fires about 2 projectiles in your direction, and then we're going to move forward 2 tiles away and then do this in a grid pattern around the room. Hopefully the visuals on screen illustrate what I'm saying a little bit better than I'm explaining it. When using a crossbow, for me it basically meant I was able to get 2 hits off, move 2 spaces, get 1 hit off, move 2 spaces, get 2 hits off, and so on. The most important goal is that he attacks the same square twice before you do though, because otherwise you could run out of squares in the room because this stuff never goes away. And then obviously don't stand on squares he's already attacked because you'll take massive damage. After you get him down to about a 1/3 HP, he'll enter the last phase of the fight, which is really simple. All you need to do is make sure you don't attack him while he's facing your direction. So what you do is stand in one quadrant of the room, attack him when he's faced away, and don't attack him when he's faced you. Don't worry too much about doing anything fancy here and trying to get in extra hits by moving to other quadrants of the room while he's facing you. Literally just stand there if he faces you and don't attack. This isn't a speed run and he won't do any damage to you, so you're not wasting supplies. Basically, once you get to the last third, you should feel relieved because it's going to be really easy for the rest of the fight. So overall, I recommend using no supplies here if you can, not even a dose of prayer potion, because you'll get a full restore after the fight, and it's such a slow fight with such low damage that you don't really necessarily need to rush things by using prayer or anything. I did use Eagle Eye until my prayer dropped to 0 and then just let the rest of the fight play out normally. So after Zarpus, definitely make sure you grab the Dawnbringer from the skeleton by the exit and then head into Verzik, which is going to be our final challenge. Stand by her left side in order to initiate the fight. And as soon as it starts, you're going to want to get off 2 special attacks and 1 normal attack before running behind the nearby pillar. She'll fire out an attack, and then you can attack her 2 times back before running back behind the pillar. You don't need to worry about praying during this point, because if you do happen to get caught by one of the balls by being out in the open, it only does 40 damage off prayer, so it's nothing too scary, and I think it's worth saving the prayer for this part. Overall, it shouldn't take too long to get through the first phase, because it's literally just attacking her with Dawnbringer, and then make sure you get away from the pillars as her health drops to 0, because otherwise they can do some big damage when they fall. So this is where things get weird again. We're going to be just ranging Verzik from a distance, which simplifies the mechanics a lot. You can just run away from the spiders that she spawns that normally do big damage to you and you have to kill with the right style, just by running around the room. This is also where our Dragon Dagger comes into play, because we'll need to use the poison effect it has to kill the purple healing spiders that appear. So the second phase is actually just making sure that you attack Lady Verzik with your ranged weapon, you run around the room when she spawns a spider, and you kill the purple spiders with poison when they appear. The only other thing that you need to be doing is moving a couple of tiles between each attack, because her ranged attack is delayed, and if you get off the tile she sends it to, you will be able to avoid the damage completely. Otherwise, just keep up pray from ranged in case you mess up. She also occasionally sends out little magic attacks that do minor damage, nothing to worry about. Definitely recommended here that you preserve your Ceridome Bruise if you can by using the bandages first, though try not to use the bandage unless you need a dose of prayer potion as well, because that's included in the bandage and you want to get the most out of them that you possibly can. So after this, on to the third phase, which can be a little bit of a newbie trap, as she heals from your damage if you attack her at the wrong time. So it's kind of hard to know when it's going to happen because she only channels it for just a couple of seconds, but you'll get a feel for how long you can attack her safely before she's going to summon her red spider minions, which means that you can't attack her, otherwise she heals. The key part here is don't kill both spider minions, just kill the one nearest you, and keep running back and forth like you were during the first phase. If you kill both spider minions, she will almost immediately summon more. But if you keep one alive, it'll just walk around mindlessly for a while and it'll give you more time to actually damage Verzik. It will die on its own after a short while and she'll summon more, but this can be a key trigger to let you know that she's about to enter her state where you can't damage her. During this phase, pray magic as her primary attack becomes a homing magic attack that you can't avoid, but make sure you're moving a few tiles each attack because the ranged attacks will still come out randomly. So after you finish this phase, you'll be entering the final phase where she transforms into a giant walking spider. And this is where things get really hard. So the first thing you want to look out for is if she turns blue during her attack, you'll want to pray magic, as this will be a magic attack coming your way. If you don't see the blue glow, pray ranged, as this means that she's used a ranged attack. The other thing that she'll do during this phase is continue to summon little spider minions that you just need to run away from. I do this by running back and forth from the room, kind of running under her between attacks in order to make sure I keep moving away from any potential minions. She also has a series of special attacks that she uses during this phase, the first of which is the web cannon. This is really easy to dodge in singles in story mode, as you just kind of need to run around the room in a slow-ish circle. Make sure you stay towards the outside of the room and just run around. There's really no reason you should get webbed in this mode. So after this, you'll continue attacking and running away. Make sure you stay out of melee distance and make sure that you keep running and keep an eye out for the next special attack, which in my case was the cannon. And basically the way the cannon works is you need to go to a specific spot on the ground that turns yellow to protect yourself from the damage, which is really simple. She can't be damaged during this, so just make sure you run to the spot and wait until the attack is over. I think the hardest part about this fight is making sure that your health stays as high as possible while you're managing moving around the room and attacking consistently. So in order to do this, I basically chugged brews when I ran under her because I knew I wasn't going to be attacking anyway. The key part is to remember 3 doses of brew for 1 dose of restore, so make sure you're taking 1 dose of restore for at least every 3 doses of brew. And if you have some bandages left, use them after your brews here, as obviously you want to get that combat stat boost from the bandages last, so it doesn't get taken away by the brews. The last thing that Verzik will do is actually summon a tornado that follows you around the room when she's pretty close to dead. And with this methodology of running around the room and running under her between attacks, I found out that the tornado was completely ignorable. I basically had to change nothing about my strategy after it came out, which was pretty nice. So when it comes out, don't fret, just keep running around the room and it should be pretty much the same kill. So just continue this for a while and you'll eventually get her down to 0 health and beat the theater on story mode. So yeah, that's all there is to it. I wish you the best of luck and I hope you're able to complete your Night at the Theater solo mode. One more thing before we go though, I of course need to thank the members of the channel that have joined so far. Your support means so much to me and I am eternally grateful. And of course an extra huge thank you to our top tier supporters, TuonPaendrag, OneKiller912, and Peepo Time. Thanks for watching this guide, and I will see you in my next video. Take care.